All right, well, thank you so much, Chris, for organizing this, and it's nice to kind of interact, even if it's sort of remotely, with some of my other anthropology colleagues. So I'm over on the other campus. I'm over on the west side, and there are actually lots of anthropologists over there. But we're doing kind of different things, but I think all sort of united by some common principles. And I'm going to talk about some work that I'm doing that I, through this invitation, really started thinking more of as anthropological work, because I think of it originally as sort of in service to the work that we do. And so what I want to talk to you about is the work that I do with this wonderful team of colleagues and friends studying sort of the experience of sexual harassment, sexual assault, gender discrimination in workplaces. And so that I kind of threw those terms at you without much warning, so just so you were aware, those are the kinds of things that this work does touch on. So I understand that that can be really challenging and difficult, and I will share with Morag and with everyone else that I frequently cry when I'm presenting my work, because it's challenging. We're working with really tough things, and we are interacting with people, and I think it's one of kind of the beautiful aspects of the anthropological approach, that it welcomes people into your sphere of experience, and it can be really challenging because of that. So what I'm going to talk about today is a sort of a story of acknowledgement, evidence, consequences, and potential paths to freedom and justice within the workspace. But I couldn't tell the story that I'm about to tell without my team of colleagues, all also biological anthropologists. By the way, I'm a biological anthropologist. I think I'm the only one on the panel. But we all are here. And I wanted to kind of start that by identifying who we were. So I want to tell you a little bit about how did this collaboration come about, because our initial scholarship as individuals was not in the area of understanding gender discrimination within science. That's where we came to as biological anthropologists who had worked together on a variety of projects. So Robin and I, who had been in the upper right-hand corner, she and I did our postdocs together in anthropology at Northwestern. And then Kate and Katie and I had recently edited a book on primate development. So we had known each other professionally and personally for some time. But the reason I put this up here is because we are anthropologists, and when we had this discussion about this phenomenon in our field, we recognized that we had sort of a unique skill set as anthropologists, as social scientists, to describe a phenomenon in a rich sense, drawing on both quantitative methods, counting, measuring, using statistics, kind of the world that most of my work resides, but also qualitative methods, where we actually sort of do descriptive interview work, thematic analysis, to really understand lived experience of this phenomenon that we have quantified and measured. So putting those different sort of skill sets and experiences as social sciences, broadly trained social scientists together, gave us the groundwork to reveal what we revealed. So I want to present, because we are scholars in here, and some of us work in sort of hypothesis-based studies. I'm going to present sort of evidence for a hypothesis. And the question that we're exploring is, why are women, especially women of color and sexual and gender minority folks and more, underrepresented in science? And there are a couple of explanations for that. One potential hypothesis is they're just not that into science. Science or academia more broadly, kind of the life of the mind here enshrined at UIC, is a meritocracy, right? So just the very best and the brightest just rise to the top, and they're drawn to fields and they succeed in those fields because of their inherent fit and goodness, right? If a lot of you may not know of the bell curve argument, there are a lot of publications. I'm not going to talk about them, but you can Google it to see that it is a fancy name for scientific racism. Most of the work that kind of argues this perspective we would describe as scientific racism. But that's one way of describing this inherent disparity. Another hypothesis, you can probably guess which one I'm going to promote, is that science and academia just isn't that into them, that science is embedded in the rest of our culture, which is biased against women, femmes, people of color, gender minorities, etc. So if we accept that the work that we do and the institutions that we inhabit are actually part of the rest of society and the rest of cultural norms, it gives us an idea for understanding why there is such misrepresentation across different fields of study, emphasis here being science. So the question really is, who do we perceive as belonging in spaces of intellectual inquiry? And just a couple of examples. You can't see this, but this is an email I got several years ago from Elsevier. Elsevier is a Elsevier, recently banned by the University of California system. They are a kind of preeminent publisher of journals. They sent this email. What I hope you can see, at least from the distance, and there'll be more, is you see kind of that puzzle piece, and this is like little like mosaic of faces. The question or the email that came is, come to Elsevier, publish in Elsevier, and be part of the picture of reputable science. So pulling up on this picture of reputable science with this puzzle piece missing, there's a lot missing in this picture of reputable science, but this is what they sent out to probably millions of people to get them to publish in their journals. I'm not on there, and I'm white, and I'm not even on that picture. So there are some problems, but it really kind of drives home this idea of what does a reputable scientist look like? Because the world has ideas about who belongs in spaces of inquiry. The world has an idea of who is the face of reputable science. One of those workplaces is the field. So we've talked a lot in the talks about field work, but if you're not fully familiar with the concept of field work, it is work that is done in a sort of immersive, experiential kind of way in a specific location. And that location can be lots of different places. It can be very far away. It can be very remote. It can be very separate from your home institution, where there are sort of a set of rules and norms that people kind of subscribe to. Often in the field, the phrase that you will hear quite literally, it's a phrase we heard many times in the course of doing this work, is that what happens in the field stays in the field. Very permissive, anything goes, largely because the systems that sort of dictate how field work is done has largely been dictated by white men with power. So having a system that's really permissive is a pretty great system. Now, it's really important because about 90% of anthropology dissertations are actually forged in the field. They are based on field research. It is the essence of anthropological inquiry, the field, however defined. And if you look for a job, a faculty job or a postdoc, field experience required. An active field site, like you still have access to your field site, is often really required for securing a job. So this is a critical kind of developmental crucible for the anthropological professions, right? So we wanted to better understand our particular specific workplace to see if that could contribute to a better understanding of that one hypothesis for why there is such poor representation. So we approached it, as I said, we kind of brought together many skill sets. I'm going to talk about two different publications, the hashtags. Hashtag Safe13, hashtag Safe2, come back to that. So for the quantitative aspect, we had a survey design with questions about experience based on legal definitions of harassment and assault. Our final sample size for this study was 666, so you can make of that what you will. And then kind of following up, and these two phases of research were happening concurrently, were kind of in-depth phone interviews with people who indicated they would be willing to talk to us. Now, we had a huge response of people who said they would be willing to talk to us. We had 666 people respond to the survey. We had about 250 people say, yes, we would like to talk to you on the phone, which is, for those who do that kind of work, that's enormous. This is stuff people want to talk about. We talked to 26. Nobody has time to talk to 250 people in the course of this work, because we had no funding for this, and this was not our primary work. This was all stuff that we did as untenured female faculty deciding we were going to take this on. I recommend it. It's scary, but it works out. So I want to say a little bit about who I can talk about and who I can't talk about, and where there's still a lot of work to be done. And that is, our sample was predominantly from the US, identified as female, white, and straight. So that's who responded. Now, that does sort of reflect kind of the skew, the gender skew at least, in social sciences broadly, certainly anthropology. But I just want to be very clear, this prohibits really deep exploration, the data I can show you on issues for non-white, non-straight, non-binary, et cetera, respondents. So whenever we're thinking about what data are telling us, what are they not telling us is also something really important to be thinking about. So I'll just sum up. Yes, it happens. Harassment, assault, it happens. That's the takeaway. It's common. You can see 71% of women in the survey said yes, they had experienced sexual harassment. 26% said yes, they had experienced sexual assault. It happens mostly to people early in their career. Yes, it does happen to men in both categories of experience, but quantitatively, much less than women experience. But for all, it's primarily happening in the early stages of your training, of your experience in this discipline. Why does it matter who the status of the target or victim, or whatever phrase is more comfortable for you, and the perpetrator? Why does that matter? Well, what we found in our work is that, yes, men experience these kinds of targets, this kind of targeted behavior, but it's more likely to come from peers. For women, more likely to come from somebody with power over them. Why does that matter? Because the person who has power over you is a representative of the institution. They embody that structure of access and power, right? They are representing the university. They are representing the field site. They might be representing your committee that you're studying under. So they have a huge amount of power. And there's lots of workplace research that shows when bullying or other kinds of abuse is directed vertically down, the ramifications for psychological effects and satisfaction in the job and job performance go down. So it becomes a circular thing where you have abuse coming from down, and now your work performance begins to suffer. And so now there's an objective thing to continue the cycle of abuse, right? Because you're not doing your job as well. And I think many of us have experienced that when we know in this whole cycle we are not doing our work as well, and it opens us up to further attack. So those are the numbers. And the numbers actually reveal something important about the experience, right? They tell us something qualitatively about women's experience versus men's experience. But here's just sort of an example of the kind of gender discrimination that was experienced that we uncovered through interviews. We would do these really, really long days, but we wouldn't be warned when they were coming. They would just happen, and so I couldn't bring enough food. And I would try to vocalize, I'm tired, I can't go any further, I need to eat. The second time I spoke up, another two girls were quick to say, yeah, we've been out a really long time, let's go eat. We started getting comments like, oh, well, the ladies are hungry, so I guess we have to leave. This kind of experience doing field work is extremely common. It's the kind of in the category of a put down as opposed to a come on, and the put down is actually far more pervasive and much more common under the umbrella of sexual harassment than the come on is at work, but it's just constant. And what it leads to is this feeling of, it's not like someone specifically says you're not welcome here anymore. It's just a constant, subtle attitude that makes you feel like you don't want to be there anymore. And that made me really mad, that someone could take something that I thought would be great and sort of take it away from me and say, yeah, this isn't for you. You're not welcome here. needless to say, these kinds of experience were cited as reasons that people left the discipline of anthropology entirely. So, does anthropology matter? Well, in this example, we designed and implemented a classic mixed method study design in the specific context of anthropological fieldwork to determine the lived experience within the particular culture of academic science, yielding important explorations of power and revealing deficits in intersectional knowledge, and giving us some idea of how do we apply this going forward. And so I want to finish, I hope I have a couple more minutes, I'm probably going to take them anyway, to explore this idea of application. So where are we now with this work? So let me say, since say 13. So there was this week in October 2017. A lot of stuff happened in October of 2017 in this one particular week. October 8th, 2017, the Harvey Weinstein story broke. October 11th, our second paper was published. Now, when we published the paper in 2014, this was a conversation people had in pockets. It was not part of a national dialogue about the workplace and what it was like to be on the receiving end of a constant stream of cultural abuse, right? That changed. So all of a sudden, we're living in a different world where this conversation is one that pretty much everybody on some level is taking part in across myriad disciplines, myriad endeavors, across from Hollywood to domestic work and farm work. And I don't know if you watched the, what was this, like the Golden Globes or the Oscars? I can't keep track. But I don't know if you watched a couple years ago when they first brought, the stars brought people who were representative of these different organizations engaging in that work. So Meryl Streep is with IGEN. IGEN Poo, who is the executive director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and also my daughter's stepmom. So it's still a big topic of conversation in our family. But now the press is focused on a lot of this, a little less on academia, so I'm here to tell you a little bit about where things are. As of now, what did not exist before are codes of conduct at conferences, recognizing if the field site is a workspace, so is the conference site. And the conference site is also often treated as what happens at the conference stays at the conference. There's been a lot of change. There's a lot more to be done. But there is some change in that the professional societies themselves have adopted policies. Now, no codes, that's the red light. Unenforced codes of conduct puts you in a yellow area. Best practices, codes where there is enforcement, or I like the idea of shared responsibilities and obligations, right? What happens if you transgress this new social norm? Almost every one but one of these organizations actually has, if this happens at the site, this is what we will do. The one that doesn't is my own, American Association of Physical Anthropologists. And also the AAA, American Anthropological Association, does not have a formal code of conduct or any kind of ramifications. They have a no tolerance policy. So we have some work to do in anthropology. The one organization, the one field on here represents working with people. We have the most work to do. But National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine have issued an important report last summer, pulling together decades of this work. It's a 300-page study with really important takeaways about how we actually can make change. One of those is to break the chain between the institutional dependence on federal funds and their inability or unwillingness to do anything to stop the abuse that's happening that they're paying for, that we as taxpayers are paying for. That is also changing. The National Science Foundation and most recently the National Institutes of Health have issued new policies where they are starting to cut off federal funding to people who are under investigation and have found to be guilty through these investigations for sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and other forms of abuse, thus trying to break that very tight, almost parasitism between the federal funding and the PIs, the principal investigators who have all of the power. So I want to leave with this idea, this reminder that anthropology, most broadly defined, is the study of people. And we can forget about that when we look at bar charts and we look at pie charts and we look at numbers, right? I can show you percentages, and they're sort of shocking percentages. But when you see a dot plot where each one of these dots is a person, and it shows you kind of this terrible pipeline of experience of abuse to outcome, satisfied by any kind of outcome from reporting what had happened to them. This is unacceptable. Each one of these people deserves better. And when we first published this study and published this image, a very brave woman on Twitter claimed one of those dots as her own, told the world that she was one of these people. Many of us in this room are one of these dots in lots of different ways of framing it. And that's what we always have to remember in the work that we're doing, that we're working with people. All right. Thank you.